if we start with Steph, how have you ended up in front of that edit system that we see in the background?
Well, so I didn't know that editing was a career path when I was younger. I basically saw the movie Seven, probably in like middle school or something, which I think is super inappropriate probably at the time. But I saw the movie Seven. I loved the opening titles. I was just obsessed, and I was fascinated that you could it tells a story without any dialogue. I was like, oh, you can tell stories just visually, and I basically was just trying to replicate that kind of a feel with, my VHS tapes and just our home movie camera, still not realizing that editing was a possibility or that it was a career that one could have. Fast forward, I was a professional dancer for a while. I moved out to LA knowing I wanted to get involved in film and television. And so I was just kind of knocking on every door that I could find, just saying I'll bring you coffee, I'll do anything, whatever it is, I just want to help and get involved. And I ended up I booked a night assistant job on a documentary that was in production, basically in the back of where I was working. I was working at Smashbox Studios. And I kind of just fell in love with the process. I was like, wait a second, this is kind of what I was doing when I was, in middle school and high school without realizing it. And I just kind of built from there. I was like, I want to pursue this further. And I just kind of, from there networked and worked my way up slowly. And here I am.
Here you are. And here you are. I mean, would that be considered a sort of traditional way of working your way up, sort of just knocking on doors, starting out as an assistant and then getting more responsibility that way?
I think so. I mean, I think some people get started kind of on set more, which I never really did. I kind of just started in post and stayed in post. But yeah, I'm more I started as a post PA or as an assistant, and then just slowly build relationships, learn more about the craft, and then eventually, hopefully, someone will give you the bump up or take a shot on your work. In my case, it was I was working at a company that did online, so they did a lot of color correction, sound, stuff like that, and I knew they always had projects coming in that they were editing, but I never really got a chance to be a part of that. And I was like, I think I might leave to go try to pursue editing. And they're like, no, don't leave. We have something coming in. And it was a documentary basically about the 2,000-Year-Old Man sketch with Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner from the 60s and 70s. And I was like, yeah, of course, I would love to take a stab at editing this documentary. And it was just super fun. It was such a cool experience to work on something with them. I was like, oh, I can just retire now because I'm obsessed with Mel Brooks. But yeah, it's just having that first opportunity, someone to give you that bump up is crucial, I think, for anyone.
Turning over to Dan then, it sounds like your career path was similar because you were also a professional dancer for a time. But
I still am.
But you're an edit producer. I mean, your current title is edit producer. How does that differ from being an editor?
It depends a lot on the program. So, for example, working on Taskmaster at the moment, I work with the editor to cut down the big 3-hour record that they've done at the studio to the 47 minutes that we're allowed. And that's kind of a collaborative process of us discussing what should and shouldn't stay in the show, and cutting that down together. But obviously the editor, I'm quite deferential to editors on that. The ones that I work with are vastly experienced and brilliant at doing these studio shows. So, but then when I work on other shows, for example, as you mentioned, Sexy Beasts, or I've done children's shows, I'm in the edit writing the script for a voiceover. So not only am I working with the editor collaboratively to decide what's going to go on the show, I'm also writing the script at the same time and voicing in that script as a guide voice, so that they have something to work with and to work their incredible magic and make my terrible jokes look like they might actually be quite funny.
How did you get into your chair?
I was never massively in love. I enjoyed production and TV, but I was never massively in love with it. But once I got into the edit and I was able to write things and have that collaborative process with an editor, I went, oh, this is what I like doing. And I have produced stuff and I've done a very, very tiny bit of directing as well. But this is by far the best thing that I enjoy. So these are the jobs that I kind of aim to try and get.
Both of you have had experience with comedy, but very different types of comedy. Talk a little bit about the process of editing sketch comedy, and some of the sort of interesting sort of maybe non-traditional things that a Black Lady sketch show actually is doing as well. Can you just talk us through a little bit of the process of that,
Sure.
and when you came to the show?
Yeah, so I came onto the show for season 2. I didn't work on season 1, but I was obsessed with the first season. So I definitely at least kind of knew what I was getting into. But usually on the show, our dailies will come in. We know we have a grid that says every sketch that's being shot. And so it's kind of like a free for all. There's 3 editors. So we might be finishing one sketch one day and then we see like, oh, tomorrow this one is coming in. I'm going to grab that before someone else does. It's kind of kind of like, oh, I really would like this one. But each sketch is so different, and there's 45 sketches, I think, from season 2. So it's like you're doing 45 different short films, and you kind of have to see what the genre is that the sketch is in, right? So it might be horror one day, it might be like a rom-com one day, or like a biblical sketch one day. So usually like that morning or the night before, like I would kind of watch something that was in that vein, where I'm like, okay, tomorrow I'm doing like a horror sketch, right? So it's like, I'm going to watch Saw tonight. And then, the next day, the dailies kind of come in, and you think about like what elements made, like, for example, Saw, what made it work as a horror piece, and how you could like comedically address that as well. So it's like sound is huge in horror, or music might be huge in horror, so I'll usually start by just like pulling as much sound effects, or just like brainstorming ideas of how to make that pop. And then the dailies come in, you kind of go through all the footage that they shot. There's a ton of improv on our show. So it's like they'll basically film like one solid take that's like as scripted, and then the rest they'll just kind of like have fun with it and play around. So usually I would put together like a scripted version of it, right, where I'm like, this is what it is supposed to be in theory. And then I would go through and pull all of the funny improv moments that I could. Robin, our showrunner and the star of the show, basically, when I first met her, was like, it doesn't matter what's in it, just make sure it's as funny as it can possibly be. Like, I don't want to see it unless you think it's hilarious, right? So you basically just go through and find as many improv moments as you can to like pepper in and try to make it work with what's scripted, and make sure it still matches the tone and the style of the show. Something else that's kind of unique about Black Lady's sketch show is if you watch it, the pace is just super fast. Every joke is like joke upon joke upon joke. There's not a lot of breathing room that you might see if it's like a live sketch show where it pauses for laughs. So just getting used to that style is kind of unique to our show. But I think it also just like elevates it in a way, because it's just so packed, like full of jokes, jam packed. So that's usually how we would approach.
But what's the sort of turnaround time that you've got on those to edit a sketch?
It kind of depends on what the sketch is. Usually you have maybe like 2 days ish, 2 or 3 days probably per sketch. So you get the dailies. Usually I would get the dailies, look through everything, kind of assemble everything as best I could. And then the second day I would like put music, sound, clean it up, and make it as like make it as funny as I could, and then I would kind of show others, because I think collaboration is such a huge part of comedy editing. So it's like I would that second day kind of get through everything, show other people, get their feedback, and then the last day just kind of like tweak it, make sure it matches kind of what everyone is thinking will be funny, and then you pass it off. So that's your editor's cut. Then you get director's notes. So you do your director's pass, and then you do your producer's pass of notes. And it's not until the very end that they kind of decide what the order should be for each episode. So really, we're just doing it on a sketch by sketch basis until the very end, and then we're like, okay, here's what the grand plan will look like.
I think coming over to Dan for this next one, because I think one of the things that is always going to be difficult with an edit is kind of trying to keep fresh eyes on it. And then with comedy, you've got that extra added level of trying to remember what was funny about stuff when you were going in. So, I mean, what are the challenges to editing funny?
I mean, that is a problem, because I come in, I have been to see Taskmaster, for example, filmed, but I kind of don't go now because it's a really long way away from where I live, and it's quite difficult to get to. But more importantly, it's actually quite nice to come into the edit completely fresh and to just watch it kind of clean without knowing what was going to happen at all, and have that nice first reaction to what you think is going to be really funny for the show. But it is difficult because you watch it multiple times, and then there are things that you got absolute belly laughs the first time you watch them, and then the fifth or sixth time, when you're looking for time to lose to get to the running time, you think, yeah, it's kind of easy to forget how much you laughed when you saw it completely fresh. So I think that is a challenge, but also, yeah, it's tricky, because I don't think just because you laughed at something the first time, you gave it a big laugh, it doesn't necessarily mean that it should stay in the show just because of that. So it is hard, I think. I can't, I don't think there's any kind of rule for it or anything like that. A lot of the show, I think, is also about balance of I don't think Taskmaster would work if you're constantly having those huge big laughs all the way through. There has to be a little bit of light and shade in there as well, and a little bit of time to breathe and gather your thoughts. So
Dan, you've got an actual, a physical runtime you have to get it down to. Steph, what were your limits with runtime on the individual sketches?
I don't know that there's like a set time per sketch. They all kind of fell within I want to say within the 3 to 5 minute range. But in the end, the episodes can't be over 30 minutes. And I think our sweet spot that we found is somewhere around 28, 30. So that definitely had a big impact in how the episodes were laid out, right? So it's okay, here's this assortment of sketches that'll get us to about 28, 30. And so we kind of just move sketches around based on that, or at least that's one of the factors. So yeah, even though we don't have technically a running time, we still were trying to match that kind of that formula.